Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a Memory Dump, the semi-regular show where I essentially dump my thoughts on various gaming-related topics in hopes of generating some kind of discussion. So today the topic is going to be Games of the Year, and basically why I think they're not a good thing. I came to this conclusion when I was wondering, I was like, what is my Game of the Year for 2015? And I ultimately came to the conclusion it would be Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Wii U. I absolutely love that game. It's an amazing game. And then I started thinking about it. Wait a second. Xenoblade Chronicles X released in December. And then I started thinking back, and I was like, well, 2014, my Game of the Year was, wait a second, it was the Talos Principle, narrowly beating out Bayonetta 2, but the Talos Principle, if I recall correctly, was also released in December. And then I started thinking, well, a lot of, let's say, YouTubers, a lot of gaming outlets, a lot of people in general just start naming their games of the year in December. And I was like, wait a second, this is a problem. The only time that you should be declaring your games of the year in December is if you stop playing games in December. And even then, what happens if there's games released in December that you eventually play later on? You can't retroactively go back and say, oh wait, no, I like this game more, I want to make it Game of the Year. It's too late. So I think announcing Games of the Year in December is a dumb idea. It's stupid. It's, I think you should at least wait a couple months into the next year before you go ahead and start announcing what the Game of the Year for, we'll say the previous year should be. But actually, alternatively, I think you should get rid of Games of the Year altogether. And we'll talk about that, why I think that is. Now, I was also thinking, the business side of things. December, you got the holidays, you have a lot of people doing a lot more searching. I know the traffic on my channel, it goes up during the holidays. There's a lot more views, a lot more people looking, and I don't know if that's because they have more free time or if they're doing more research, but ultimately, it means that, we'll say the media has a lot more of the people's attention. And I think that might be one of the driving forces why we get Game of the Year announcements in December, is because that's what's going to drive the hits. I think it's ultimately a business reason, and as a result, I think business is once again encroaching on, we'll say, good discussion. Now, see, so the problem with making those announcements, like I mentioned before, is that good games can often get overlooked. I remember when the Talos Principle was first released, and a lot of places had already announced their Games of the Year. And I was sitting there going, but what about the Talos Principle? Have you played the Talos Principle? This game is amazing. And you know what? They might not have liked the Talos Principle as much as I did. And it might not have gotten the Game of the Year either way. But the fact of the matter is, it was robbed of the opportunity to be considered. Which brings up another point. The Game of the Year title is about as useless as a numerical score. Think about this. The game is labeled Game of the Year. That's basically 10 out of 10. It is basically an indicator, hey, this thing is amazing. You need to play this. But what if the person doesn't like the genre? What if you got a bunch of different outlets, a lot of different people saying, this is Game of the Year, this is my Game of the Year, this is my Game of the Year, without some sort of context as to what that person likes, without knowing more about this game? It's kind of foolish to say this is the Game of the Year because people might not even like that genre. It's like I said, it's like a score. And, this is where we get into that weird ground of where we're talking about games and, subjectively, giving our opinions. What do we like? What don't we like? And which is why I think scores are a stupid thing. If anything, you should have a separate, we'll say, category. Adventure Game of the Year, first-person shooter Game of the Year, shooty McWhatever thing Game of the Year. And I get that there are some people, some places who try to give different little awards based on the different genres, and I think that is actually probably more helpful than just straight-up Games of the Year. So I think retroactively, I'm going to say that the Talos Principle was my favorite story-based and favorite puzzle game of the year, and Bayonetta was my favorite action game of the year. There we go. I fixed my own conflict. Now, another problem I can sort of see with having your Game of the Year announcements happening, say, in December, especially, when a lot of the big blockbuster games, they come out in November, is that what if there's not enough time to play the game thoroughly and really notice the cracks? How many times have you played a game and gone, holy crap, this thing is amazing, I love this. And then, you put a few more hours into it and you start to see the cracks. You start to say, you know what, this game is not as good as I originally thought it was. This happened to me on several occasions. So it gets me thinking, if you have these games that are released at the end and they do end up getting Games of the Year, well, there's the question of, well, do they really deserve it? Or is it just because players hadn't found all the faults with it yet? So there's a lot of things that should be taken into account, which is why I think that if you're going to name something a Game of the Year, or like I said before, a game of a specific genre for the year, I think that you should at least wait until, at the very least, maybe the end of January of the following year. Give yourself some time to really stop and think and, really let it stew in your head before you go ahead and make that declaration. So I just wanted to go ahead and talk about that. It's sort of a short episode. I might get a little bit longer in later ones, just, to get things started with this series. What were your games of the year? Or if you have multiple, hey, go ahead, split them into categories. I'd like to hear about what games you enjoyed the most in the previous year. What do you think about games of the year? Is it a good thing, or is it, just another buzzword that's used to sell copies and advertisement? Or, hey, am I just being too cynical? Let me know what you think. If you like this content and would like to see more, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, leave it a thumbs down. I don't care, it's alright, you won't hurt my feelings. I appreciate the feedback. Either way, let me know what you thought. What are your games of the year? And all the stuff I said before that I'm just repeating myself and being horribly redundant about. Until next time, I would like to ask you all to game on.